My name is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is Friday, May 11th, 2012. I'm in Oklahoma City in the home of Deborah and Carl Rubenstein. Carl, you're a MD, a heart specialist. You play a mean Indian flute. And Deborah, you've had a full life as a homemaker. You guys travel a lot. You have a daughter in Italy. You've been a big part of this collecting process, and you've both been involved since the 1970s collecting native art. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Glad to do it.
Yeah, we're happy to.
So let's start with you, Carl. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, and that's where I grew up.
And what did your mother and father do for a living?
My father was a CPA. My mother worked for my dad as a secretary. Pretty good summation.
Did you have much artwork in your home growing up?
Yeah, we did. Not Native American art, but a variety of forms of artwork. Not in any major sense. I had an interesting cousin, or actually my dad's cousin, who really was a collector of some very interesting art and knew a lot of artists in the New York area. We had a lot of exposure to art, but not as collectors.
And so no one in the family was especially artistic, but there was that interest. Yeah.
That's my mother. Yeah, my mother was musically artistic and actually did some painting. But other than that, I'd say no one was, unless you count photography. I had an uncle who was a professional photographer and a very good one.
Interesting. You saw his work at an early age. Were you interested in drawing or painting growing up?
Since I have absolutely no talent along those lines, I guess the answer really is no.
The Qualla Reservation is located there in North Carolina. Did you have any exposure? Did you go up there at all, or had you had any exposure? Oh, you're in New Jersey, so I'll back it up there. So you didn't have really any chance to be around Native culture too much growing up?
Yes and no. I mean, certainly not what we have here, but a lot of Native American history in our area. The Lenni Lenape Indians were a strong part of the history of the Perth Amboy area. And there were murals in the high school, as I recall, portraying the life of the Lenni Lenape.
So in your public school education, you got some exposure, a little bit of, right?
Yeah.
Well, Deb, how about you? Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina. And my family's in the furniture business. My mother's father started the business, and my father continued it. And then after my father died, my mother continued it. So that's what they did.
Did you have very much artwork in your home?
Yes, we did. And it was not Native art, but Native American art, but a lot of American artists. And nobody was artistic per se, but always appreciated art.
Were these like reproductions, or?
No.
There were some originals?
Yeah, they were originals. My parents had a great appreciation for beauty, so they enjoyed the artwork. And then we went to Cherokee when we were young.
As a family?
As a family, we went out west, we went to Santa Fe, and Mother and Daddy collected small pieces from Lucy Lewis, and my sister and I kept saying, why didn't we get something large when they were out there? But so we did always have some Native American art, but not hanging. It was more into the pottery or, I guess it was all pottery. Baskets.
So they were collecting sort of in the 40s. Your parents were collecting in smaller.
Yeah, and the 60s probably,
Mm-hmm.
50s, 60s.
50s,
Yeah.
60s. Did you have any extended family who were artistically inclined?
No.
And how about your own interest in drawing or painting?
Oh, I always wanted to. I always wanted to be a pianist, but I didn't have any ability. So,
Carl, back to you in junior high school. Did you take any art classes?
The art classes in the schools would were part of the curriculum, so there were regular art classes, of which I was not one of the stellar performers, but not so much, not really history of art or exposure to fine art. It was mostly an attempt to get kids to be able to draw and create things, and that was pretty limited for me.
And how about when you got into college? Obviously you had an interest, I don't know if you had an interest in medicine yet, but did you have any art history background at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, my interest in medicine really began when I was in grade school, and that continued on
okay.
through, but that's
Wow.
not what I pursued in college. But yes, I took courses in art and art history while I was in college, with both European art and American art.
So how did you meet Deborah?
We met at the beginning of my internship here through one of Debbie's cousins who had given her name to one of my roommates. He had never looked her up, and when he left at the end of medical school to head back east, we traded some names, and I called Debbie.
You guys were too busy to have a social life, I guess.
This is
Now,
Debbie.
where is this? Where are you interning? What?
This is at Duke University.
At Duke University. Okay. Deborah, do you remember your first date with Carl?
I do. And his roommate was not going back east, he was going up north. Because we
Well.
were east.
That's right.
North
Yeah.
Carolina is east
I've
versus Oklahoma.
Been here so long I forget.
Yes, he came over to our house, and we went to the Velvet Cloak, which was a restaurant, dance place with music, yeah, club in Raleigh. So we had a really good time that way, but
Was going to, do you remember if you went to any art exhibits, or was that part of your dating life? Did you take in art?
No, I
together?
have to say during the dating phase, it really couldn't have been, because time off for me meant one evening a week and one afternoon and evening on the weekend, and that was it.
Wow.
he was on the rest of the time, constantly. So, and I was in college.
Okay.
So we met in August, and I went back to school in September for my senior year. So I was busy, and he was busy. So the answer is no.
So you got married when you finished college, and was your first job, full-time job in Oklahoma? Is that where you went first?
When at that point,
When?
then did a research fellowship at Duke,
Okay.
and then went into the Navy for 2 years, and then back to Duke for residency in internal medicine, and then fellowship in cardiology, and then we came out to Oklahoma.
So what year are we talking about?
We moved here in 1972. I was asked to come out and join the cardiology faculty and the Medical Research Foundation.
Wow.
And we thought we would spend 4 or 5 years and head back east.
Well, when did you attend your first Native art show here in Oklahoma?
Huh.
Let's see. Well,
I'm not sure when we did our first Native art show. I remember our first purchase here in Oklahoma was probably the Curtis photograph.
that was, this is Debbie. That was from the Pickard
Yeah.
Gallery, and we did that right after we got here, and they were Curtis photogravure,
Mm-hmm.
and they had all kinds of the photographs exhibited that time at the gallery, and we just were floored by them. So we just bought. Did we just buy the one? The
We bought that
photograph
one initially. Yeah, that was one of the onion skin prints from one of the original folios. But it was one that we just fell in love with.
And you had probably collected too much prior to your getting the job here. Had you collected some Native art before? What was your first piece that you collected together?
Well, when we went to Myrtle Beach, which we do every summer, they have an antique show. It was really nice. And so they had some wonderful pots. And that was before we moved out here. And we bought several. They were wonderful pots, and they were $40, and we wanted 3 of them, but we could only afford 2. And we have regretted that third one ever since. It was a wonderful black pot with a bear claw on it, and we didn't get that one, and we really have thought about it forever. You know, you never forget those that you miss.
Right.
So every year when we go, even after we moved here, we would go to that antique show. We bought stuff as long as they had it.
Were these coming from Kuala or were they coming from the Southwest?
Well, I think originally they were from the Southwest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know they were, but they had ended up in homes
Mm-hmm.
in the East,
Right.
and then we're in the States. And so it was very disappointing for us when they stopped having that sale.
Yeah, 'cause by
Because
that
we
time,
bought wonderful things.
this is Carl again. By that time, we were out here and going back to the show and hoping that we would find something really fantastic that they didn't realize was really fantastic.
Right.
That never happened.
Now you did apparently attend some Native art shows that were at the Oklahoma City Fairgrounds, the Oklahoma Art predecessor of the Oklahoma Art Museum at that point, Oklahoma Art Center. Do you remember the first time you went to that show?
I remember going to the gallery there. I don't remember the first show there.
Well, it
actually.
would have been at the This is Debbie again. Imogene Mugg. Imogene, I'm not sure, had that gallery.
Uh-huh.
And remember, one of the first pieces we bought was a Dante
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Navaquaya piece. So we went there a lot.
What drew you to that first piece?
Oh, we just loved it. It was color and with it very simple.
So, so the first piece you bought was by Dr. Navaquaya, and the subject matter, you like the colors. You remember the subject matter?
Well, I think it was a pipe.
Peyote.
Peyote.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was
Peyote
peyote.
painting.
It is a-
Yeah,
that's a-
it is peyote. Yeah.
Yeah. Did Imogene spend time with you talking about the piece?
I'm sure
little
she
bit.
did. That was a long time ago. It was the
Oh.
early 70s. But we bought rugs from her, and I can't remember what other pieces particularly.
I don't know whether we picked up any pottery from her or not. I don't think so. I think it was the painting and rug and a couple of rugs and maybe some jewelry, but not much.
But so far you hadn't met any native artists at shows in
No.
person?
No.
Do you remember the first show you went to where artists were present?
Probably at Doris's, at the Oklahoma Indian Art Gallery.
How did you discover that gallery?
Maybe.
Yeah, our friend Mimi Smith, who knew Doris, told us about it, and maybe brought us there for that matter. And that really started things. That made a big difference.
When you knew that place was there, or you would just sort of go when you felt like it, sort of?
I think both when we felt like it, but also whenever we got word from Doris that she was having a show. I mean, Doris made the difference. We, right off the bat, I think felt like we were learning from her, and we enjoyed knowing her, and that created part of the attraction. And every time we went, we learned more about the art and the artists. And that is where we met the artists. And that was another part of the appeal of what she did.
You met Doc Tate there, I'm guessing.
Actually, I think met him once before that at the state fair. He was playing the Native American flute, and, which intrigued me. And I talked with him, but actually bought my first flute from him, I think at Doris's, when we then met him again subsequently. But that, I remember that. I remember the first time we saw him, heard him, and being so enamored of the Native American flute.
With your music background too. Did you go to the fair for several years? Did you buy artwork at the fair too? Remember?
I don't think we bought artwork at the fair.
Just turned
This is
back.
Debbie, but we did go.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
went every year for a long, long, long time.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't think of the state fair as being a focal point for artwork. And that may be unfair, but
They did sell a bit there, and
Uh-huh.
even Doris had at one point some paintings there, but yeah, I think that was before you moved out.
yeah, and nothing like what Red Earth was, for example, or
Right.
what we saw at some of the a few of the powwows that we attended.
Well, this is Debbie again. We also used to go before Doris's to Andy Anderson's. Do you remember that one? It was over near Classen.
Yeah, that's a circle.
Uh-huh.
He had,
I don't remember
It was a
buying
gallery?
anything. It was a gallery, yes. And I'm trying to remember what we must have bought something from him. But that was before we knew about Doris's.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, his was a more eclectic sort of place that had all sorts of antiques and artwork, I think. Yeah.
So, at what point did you sort of start thinking? Were you conscious of the fact that you were sort of becoming collectors as you started going to Doris's, or how did that?
I don't think you're conscious of it. You just go and see things that you love and can't stand not bringing home with you. I think that's the essence of a collector. People that just really fall in love and want something. And then it just continues. And then you end up being a collector. I don't think you start with that in mind, that you want to be a collector. But we only have things that we fall in love with.
Did you
Yeah.
always fall in love with the same piece together? Did it ever happen that you liked a piece that Carl didn't like, and vice versa?
You know, I really don't think so. We may have had
Rarely.
different degrees of being enamored about a given piece, but I don't think we ever had a conflict over a given piece. We really shared a lot of taste. Maybe because partially because I think I respect Debbie's taste so much that maybe it shaped mine.
Well, that's a blessing that you were both on the same wavelength there. Do you think is collecting primarily an emotional experience? Is it partly an intellectual
I
experience?
think a little bit of both, but I think maybe more emotional than intellectual. I don't think we really thought of ourselves as collectors. I'm not sure I really think of ourselves as collectors at this point, in the sense that we don't try to take a systematic approach to collecting a given a given type of work or a specific artist and saying we have to accumulate as much as we can of this. We really have, by and large, gone on the basis of things that sort of tug at our heartstrings. And so we've thought of ourselves as accumulators more than as collectors.
Exactly.
Well, that was another question. Did you notice any pattern to things that would attract you? Was there a certain type of image, or did you just find yourself going back to certain artists over and over? Were there any themes that?
Yeah, I think maybe the answer is in both areas. I think we've tended to really enjoy things that have interesting people, interesting faces, interesting stories, more so than things like landscapes, for example. Yes, we've had an attachment to the works of specific artists, partially because they had characteristics that we enjoyed, and probably partially because we got to know some of them, and that makes a difference. I think that does have an influence on, if you enjoy the work of an individual and you get to know that individual, it becomes even more enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the first Indian flute you purchased from Doc, can you describe your experience a little bit, how you chose the flute? And
actually, I think he had that flute with him at the gallery at Doris's, and it was one that he had made, and I don't remember the details of how it occurred, but I admired it and asked if he made any that he would sell, and he said, well, I'll sell you this one. And so that was the very first one that I bought, which I still obviously have.
right, and you came home and sort of practiced.
Began practicing and playing, and mostly by ear, but trying to pick up some of the songs, some of the melodies that I've heard him play and others, but then also just adapting it to music that I'm familiar with. And particularly as I've collected more flutes over the years, which have different characteristics as instruments, being able to use them for different kinds of music has been really kind of fun and interesting.
How many have you collected?
I think I probably have about 25, 26, something like that.
Wow, that's nice. And music as well? Do you collect CDs of native flute?
Yes, and have made use of them in a variety of settings, including in our worship services at our temple, which has really been very enjoyable and interesting, and I think people have really responded to it because it's a very beautiful, haunting sound that can be compatible with Jewish liturgical music, just as it can be with folk songs or a variety of things in addition to the traditional Native American music.
Well, there's such a strong spiritual content a lot of times in Native art, and I know your faith, your Jewish faith, is very important to you, and I'm wondering if you could talk about that, if you felt there were certain correspondences, or if you just appreciated that aspect of it.
it's something I've thought about over time, because it's interesting that maybe disproportionately we've known a number of people who also are Jewish who've had an interest in Native American art, and I've wondered why. There are some spiritual feelings that I think are part of it. Some of it, the respect for the spirituality of things in nature, and the respect for human beings, which you see portrayed very effectively. I'm not sure I can put my finger on it beyond that, but I think it is part of the feeling, part of the attraction that makes us so drawn to a lot of Native American art. Not all Native American art, but I think many of the pieces have some sort of feeling, whether it's for the individual or for the setting or for the background story, that become an important part of it.
Did you want to add anything to that, Deb? Any thoughts?
I think he covered that beautifully.
You both joined the Oklahoma Indian Art Collectors Club. Can you tell us a little bit about the club, Deborah? Approximately when you got involved and what its purpose was?
I can't remember when we got involved, but it was probably, 10 years?
Yeah.
10 years ago, so that would have been in the 90s. And it's held at people's homes and have speakers. And it's also held on Friday nights. Therefore, we go to temple. We don't go very often. But when we do go, we enjoy it. It's always a learning experience, and if we don't have anything if we feel like we just can get away from temple and go, then we do try. But it's probably twice a year that we get to go. But we enjoy it.
Yeah. And I think we learn both from the speakers and from the other people who are part of the club, because they have varied interests and collect different components of Native American art. And some of them are very knowledgeable, and I think we really have enjoyed that.
Oh, and this is Deborah again. They bring articles to show and tell, and people can tell what they know about the things that other people bring. And then they have books they give away. Marshall Getty's always brings books, and they have a raffle, and so if you win, you get some educational information. It's a lot of fun.
What have you taken for show and tell there? Have you ever taken anything?
I don't think we haven't gone enough to. I don't think we've taken anything.
Yeah, we probably have, but I really don't remember. You're right. Our attendance has been sparse enough that that's not a significant part of our memories.
How did you find out about the Collectors Club?
Was it from Mimi?
I think it's from Peter Carl.
Because that seems to be another aspect of collecting, or when you're involved in this art world, is the network of relationships, not just with the artists, but then you start getting to meet other collectors. How has that changed the process for you, or enriched the process for you?
Well, Peter Carl is probably a good example of someone we've gotten to know because of mutual interest, and his interest in pottery in particular is so intense and so much in depth that we've learned a lot from Peter. We've purchased things from him as well, but he's helped us really enjoy learning more about the pottery artists and about the pottery itself, and some wonderful, wonderful pieces.
How have your tastes in collecting changed over the years, do you think, from when you first began to collect Oklahoma Native art to today?
I don't think, as far as paintings, our tastes have changed. that much. We've been able to afford more as time went on, and we've gotten to know artists a whole lot better. We didn't, so that is a big influence. As far as pottery, your tastes, I think, have to fit your pocketbook a lot of times. And so when your children are older and you're not expending as much in that direction, then you get to put a little bit more into the size of your pots.
But our interest in pottery pretty substantially has been older pieces of work, not as much contemporary or more modernistic forms of Native American pottery. I think we really have and continue to really appreciate older pieces of work, not just because they're older, but whether it's shape or color or simplicity or a feeling that they create, there's something that's a little bit different.
This is Debbie again, but we do have a lot of contemporary artists, not modern design per se, but
Contemporary
living
potters.
contemporary potters. Judy Tafoya, we met at Red Earth. Probably Peter.
Yeah.
Who else have we met?
Well, when you've been out to the Herb Museum,
I don't know that I've met so many besides Judy. We haven't had the privilege of meeting a lot of the potters, but the few we have met have been at Red Earth.
and the Cherokee potter from
Jane Ostie.
Jane Ostie.
Yeah, I was wondering about Oklahoma potters.
Yeah. I guess that's about.
Yeah, we probably have met more and gotten to know more painters than we have potters, and yet a large part of what we've collected over time really has been pottery.
This is Debbie again. One of the, besides the pots we brought here that we had gotten at the antique show, we went out, Carl had a meeting in Scottsdale, and one of the first pieces we bought was a Helen Shupla Merlin pot, which we just adored, and we didn't know anything about Helen Shupla. We just bought it. And the funny part of that story was 6 months later, my sister went out to Scottsdale, and she bought a Helen Shupla pot, and we had not communicated. Hers was bigger, but it was the same black Merlin pot, just a different size, and we were just astounded when she told me. I said, we bought one too.
Yeah.
How interesting.
Yeah.
That is funny. How does your artwork kind of live in your home? Do you rotate things around? Let's talk about wall art and pots, the two areas. Do you change things up periodically? Do you sort of find a place and that's where they stay? How do you decide where you put things?
Well, see, if you left it to me, I would put it someplace and it would stay there. And periodically I come home and I say, Debbie, what did you move?
Oh, that's funny.
but we like to have the things that we enjoy out where we can enjoy them. We try not to store them away or hide them away. We don't buy things with a specific place in mind to put them. We buy them because we enjoy them, and then find a place where we can enjoy seeing them.
And this is Debbie again. And that's primarily when we move things. When something new comes into the house, you've got to find the right place for it. So everything starts to be moved, and that's more pottery. Most of the artwork, the paintings, have their spot. and they don't move. And so then it's just a matter of finding a ledge somewhere that the next piece can live on.
Is that sort of, are you pretty much in charge of that, Deborah? Finding the right spot? Or-
I do accept that as mine. With Carl's help.
And he orients himself by where the artwork is, so. How many paintings do you think you own?
Wow.
Well, this is Debbie again. I do know that we have maybe 13 by Merlin Little Thunder, at least.
Actually, yeah, it's probably 15 now.
You think?
Yeah.
I thought it was, okay, somewhere in that area. And Robert Taylor, we have several, and some big oils by, yeah.
Probably 5 of them.
Bob Annesley seems to be another.
He was one of the first we met at Doris's. And then we bought old
And
Mo
Doc.
Pope and Doc Tate Navaquaya, and
Yeah.
so a lot of Oklahoma.
Yeah. I think we have quite a few of Doc Tates scattered around the house. Probably Doc and Merlin and Robert Taylor are probably the largest, the ones with whom we have the largest groupings.
Have you ever like traded up, as they call it, like where you took a piece that you decided you could live without because you wanted a more expensive piece?
No, never.
Once you fall in love,
Yeah. With these, it hadn't changed, and our feelings about the paintings haven't changed. If we bought it in the 70s or whatever, no.
Yeah.
They're, as long as they were original and by an artist. The only things we've changed, we did have some prints when we were younger, which we like, but we have moved those in favor of originals.
right. Have you gotten to take any to your office, Carl? Do you have art
As a
in your
matter
office?
of fact, yes. Both the well, some of the paintings and some of the photographs, the Curtis photographs, which I've carefully labeled on the back as saying these belong to.
Yes.
But yes, and rugs as well. We've been able to enjoy having them in the office also.
You know, that was sort of a trademark of Doris's gallery too, was that sort of combination of pottery, rugs, paintings. Did you notice that right away? How did you?
Yeah, and I think some of well, 2 of the rugs that I had originally in my old office before I joined this larger group, in which we now have here, we bought through Doris.
Oh, yeah. And you have chairs in your office that we bought from Doris. I love the furniture and the combination of it. It makes it homey. And I think it's a wonderful way to display everything.
Yeah.
Have you collected any of the newer 30-something artists, and any younger artists?
I don't think so yet. Do you? I don't
No.
think so. There's
Yeah.
some that we were interested in, but we haven't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. As we've seen their work, we've looked at them and said, gee, that's really interesting, we enjoy them, but we haven't said we want to collect them or bring them into our home as much as the artists who
We don't
we've
have
gotten to
room.
know.
We're out of room.
But I think we really enjoyed some of the younger artists and some of the more contemporary Native American art. And I guess we've got a few things that would fall in that category, Ben Harjo's things. But that's not been our primary focus.
What do your children think about your collecting? Are they interested in native art as well?
They think it's wonderful, but are they as interested? Not now. And whether they ever will want it themselves, I mean, I'm sure there are pieces that each of them would want,
Yeah.
but we find that our children are not collectors. Or accumulators,
Yeah.
or and the next generation doesn't seem to be the same. And maybe it's lack of funds, or they're so busy.
It's not something they've developed yet, and I'm not sure they've developed the same interest. You know, at some point, if they said, "Gee, I'd love to have this particular piece in our home," we would be glad to let them have it. And what'll happen when we we shuffle off this mortal coil, we've thought about it, and I don't know whether which things they will want and which they won't. Mm-hmm. But I chuckled when you asked that initially, because it was this last year when our daughter Anna was here, and they walked in, and our grandchildren, our youngest grandchild, walked in, looked at her daddy, and said, "They really are obsessed with Native American things, aren't they?" That was Leah.
Oh, that's funny. Maybe the grandkids.
I'm hoping.
Yeah, and sometimes collectors do think about like museums as being a place where they'll send paintings or whatever, as you probably know. I think you made a trip to Arkansas, didn't you, to see Bill Wiggins?
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little? How you first met Bill, and what it was like to go to
Well, Bill
view that
is
collection?
another person we met at Doris's gallery. And saw him a number of times there, and then finally got to know him. The more we heard about his incredible collection, the more we thought, well, gee, we really need to see this. And he's a delightful host. And last year we went out there and spent a weekend seeing the collection that he's given to the university, and visiting in his home as well, which is, I mean, now there is a collector. I mean, there isn't an inch of wall space that isn't covered with paintings, and I think he's got things stashed under the beds, in the closets.
Not everything's on display.
No.
Even with the museum space.
Yeah, and he really has, in some respects, taken a more methodical approach to his areas of interest, which have sort of been the central part of the country in Canada and Alaska. But I mean, it's a huge, well, as you know, it's a huge collection. And he knows something about every single piece.
This is Debbie. I mean, they do a lot of research about it, and but I was just overwhelmed by his Northwest and Alaskan sculptures. And, oh my word, they are just fabulous. I really enjoy Northwest. To remember the first piece, we were at the antique show at Myrtle Beach, and we saw a basket, and it was a very small basket with the whales along the bottom, and we didn't know anything about it, and we wouldn't buy it until we went to the library and we researched it. And then we raced back and bought that little basket. That was our very first piece of Northwest, and we started learning about it, and it's a fascinating area of their art. Is fantastic. So we love that. We want to go up and travel sometime. We haven't done that.
Yeah, and we've enjoyed picking up some basketry as well. Marshall Geddes keeps telling us that the mistake we make in looking at pottery instead of baskets, he says, he says, you can drop a basket and it doesn't break.
And there are some good basket makers here in Oklahoma too. I don't know if you've looked at them yet. Given adequate space and resources, what parts of your collection would you want to deepen or broaden? And it sounds like maybe Northwest Coast art, something you mentioned, but
We would just like to keep adding the things that we love. I don't know that we'd say there was one area that we wanted to deepen. Do you think?
That in itself it assumes, again, a more methodical approach to saying we want to expand a collection. The artists, I think we would continue to look for things from the artists who we have enjoyed, and would probably, if we had significantly more space, would probably expand beyond that. I think the same thing is true of the pottery. I don't think our taste would change if we had more space. We would just find more of the things that we already enjoy.
what advice would you give another native art collector who is just starting to collect?
Buy what you love, but read and try to educate yourself about the artists and the history.
Yeah, I think that's right. I would say don't approach it as an investment or creating a collection, but look at the things that that stir something in the way of an emotional response, and then try to learn about them. And that's what makes it really fun for us.
Did you ever get any advice from another collector or gallery owner about native art that you remember stands out?
Well, Peter's always told us, given us lots of good information. And Mimi Smith, she has beautiful things, and we love going to see what she has, and she comes to look and we share. I mean, she's very knowledgeable.
But in terms of a philosophy of approach, probably things that if that's so, it's something that has developed subliminally by spending a lot of time with people like Doris and Peter and Mimi and others from whom we've learned, but not someone trying to give us a philosophy of how to approach the art or the artist.
Well, as you've mentioned, there's sort of a generational, I mean, artists are concerned too about, this interest in native art and how to sustain it. Why is it important to collect native art?
It helps the artist.
Yeah, that's a fairly generalized question. That why is it important to collect any art, or what defines Native American art, which is a very difficult, has gotten to be a more and more difficult question over time. I think the reasons, yes, it's important to support the artists, but in a sense that's a spin-off from the fact that you really enjoy what they're producing. If you are collecting certain artists or certain categories, the fact that it encourages that artist then means that he or she may be able to display more and for other people to recognize what they're doing, which kind of spreads the enjoyment and spreads their ability to survive as artists, which helps.
Is there anything you'd like to add or anything we've left out before we take a look at Some of your favorite, a few of your favorite pieces?
Well, it's just been a pleasure through the years of being associated with Doris and the Oklahoma Indian Art Gallery, and still visiting her and sharing in her open houses that she has, and that has just been a wonderful thing for us. And she's a wonderful person.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll take a look at some of your pieces.
Okay.
We're looking at one of your pots. What would you like to tell us about this piece?
Well, this is a pot that was done by Judy Tafoya, who is not from Oklahoma, but someone we've met in Oklahoma at Red Earth year after year. This was not the first of the pots that we bought from her, but maybe the one that we think may be one of her best, one that we really enjoyed. And it's a good example of something that we look at and say, I love that because of the shape, because of the polish, because of the coloration.
The size.
Yeah, but the shape makes a difference.
Oh yeah. It's just a beautiful piece.
It is. Really catching that reflected light just beautifully.
Yeah, it's probably one of her best in terms of the polishing also, which is a real art in itself, as we've come to appreciate. And being able to create, I mean, we've got a lot of pots that are small, but being able to create something that's large is, we've come to understand, is a difficult thing in itself.
Okay, we're looking at another piece of yours. If you want to tell us the...
This is a piece by Merlin, Little Thunder, and we looked at this for a long time at Doris's gallery, and then we finally were able to purchase it, and then no sooner had we done that than they decided to make a poster of it for the Jacobson house in Norman. They were, I don't remember, what was the show that they did the poster for?
I don't remember either. It was a Jacobson House show.
But it's a good example of something we were talking about before. If it were only the landscape, it probably would not have interested us anywhere near as much. But there are people, and there's a story, which is so typical of things that Merlin does. There's an interesting story involved, and there's humor that comes through.
I think part of the story's in the title, isn't it? The Queen, what is it? The day
Queen Anne got ditched at
Hog Creek.
Yeah.
The day Queen Anne got ditched at Hog Creek, right? All right, and would you like to tell us about this one?
Well, this is one of the very first paintings that we bought, and we got this at the Oklahoma Art Center. And it's a dark take Navaquaya, and this is the Peyote. What's the word I'm looking for? Ceremony. That was it. Ceremony.
And really got a really interesting early piece of dogs, probably from the early.
Well, we bought it in the early 70s.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly when it was done, but close to that.
That time, and I think partly the coloration, partially the fact that it also involves an interest in what was happening and the story behind it, and learning something about Native American spirituality that probably intrigued us. But I think the coloration is a strong part of what was attractive about it.
Nice composition too. And for this last painting, is it an oil?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell us about this one?
Well, this is a painting by Gary Ozzie, a friend who has lived here in Oklahoma for quite a few years and has very strong ties to Oklahoma, but whose strongest ties artistically are to the land in which he grew up, in the Navajo people. And when he paints things that come from that background, we think he does probably his best work. He does focus a lot on people and on horses, and a feeling of a very peaceful feeling that I think is common to the things that he paints. And even more so when he has spent more time at home in New Mexico. That's where his roots are, and I think that influences his painting in the most useful way for him.
Right, that's a really nice piece, Gary's. Well, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today.
Well, we've enjoyed it. We'd love to put all our pieces out here.